Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Top 1% Sellers Academy, and I am very excited to have with us today Mike Weinberg. We're going to find out a bit more about Mike in a few seconds, but I want to make sure you're able to see my screen, and you are some of the very first people that are seeing the launch of the Top 1% Sellers Academy. We have basically accumulated an amazing lineup of sales experts, starting with people like Mike and other people that you'll see here on this platform that will house a number of very exclusive conversations with some top sales experts from across the industry. And in addition to that, you'll be able to actually access certification content on Top 1%. As you can see here, you know, we have people like Jim Cathcart, Mike himself, Louis Sheff, Jeffrey Hazlett, Peter Myers, Ty Bennett, Tim Sanders, Stephanie Bova, and a lot of other people that we will be adding to the website on an ongoing basis. Once you become a member as well, you'll have access to a number of top sales coaches that you can work with, and you can choose to work with them one-on-one or maybe bring them into your organization, and a lot more. And I'm not going to take too much time from my conversation with Mike, but definitely explore the site, explore the store and the shop that's available on the site. And give us feedback. We're hoping it will be an amazing sales enablement and professional development tool for you as well as for your colleagues. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop the share here. And again, Mike, welcome. And I want to let the audience know we are literally in the company of greatness with Mike. He is the author of two very well-known books, Sales Management Simplified, as well as New Sales Simplified. Mike is a sales professional at heart who has now, for a number of years now, he has basically been doing his own sales coaching and consulting business. He really kind of splits his time between consulting and speaking, and we're going to actually find from him today some real-life examples of how he works with his clients. We'll take a look at three segments to this conversation. First, we'll focus on situations where he works with his clients on developing top performers. We're going to make sure he shares with you his own insights on what makes a top performer. And then in the second segment, we'll take a look at how sales managers can really kind of set the conditions for success for the team members. You know, what kind of roles should they embody and what they should be doing on a daily basis. And then the very last segment, and I think that segment will be very, very useful for a lot of the organizations that you're a part of. How can a company make sure that the sales organization is really set up for success? So with that, Mike, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here with us.
Thank you, Ash. It's fun to be here. You've had some great guests, and I appreciate the overly generous introduction. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so let's definitely kind of jump right into it. And I would really love, and as I mentioned, like to make sure this is a very unique conversation. Would love to give the listeners examples where the key dynamic that was missing in some of your client engagements was the fact that the company was struggling with the fact that the sales professionals on the team were not really performing at their best. Would love to kind of find out from you some examples of these situations, and then how do we kind of turn things around and help the listeners understand what it takes to become a top performer, a top 1%er.
Yeah, that's a big question. I could take a number of angles at that. Usually, and unfortunately, I'm usually called in when they're not performing at their best.
Yes.
Maybe it's 1 out of 20 times where I get the phone call where it's a company that's doing great and they're firing on all cylinders and they're looking to take it to the next level.
Yes.
Usually it's when results are not optimal or something's going on. So I can relate to that. Let me approach it from a couple different directions. Sometimes when the sales team is not getting the results that are desired, it's because the sales roles have not been well defined, and quite often we find that companies have the wrong people in the wrong sales roles. and I'll circle back and we could talk more about that. In general, though, I'll throw this out to start.
Yes.
There are a lot of people in sales roles today who have survived or thrived for a really long time in a reactive mode, taking care of business that was given to them, responding to demand that comes their way. And they do fine when there's lots of demand to manage. They don't do so well when they're asked to go out and hunt and look for stuff to kill. Sometimes because they're not wired that way, sometimes because they don't know how. So that's a whole category in and of itself, getting the right people in the right roles. I'll stick on the sales leadership angle on this too.
Yes.
I get called into a lot of companies where either the sales culture is off, or the salespeople, it's not just that they're not respected or treated well, it's that the company forgets their primary job. And I have been in multiple companies where there was a high growth goal, but management tasked the salespeople and kind of weighed them down with all this low value activity. They did a lot of customer service work. They would deliver parts in some of my industrial distribution type companies where it was common to ask the salesperson to go run something out to a customer. Well, that's a $10 an hour delivery job. Not right. We want someone who's making a lot more than that. So asking them to do things that aren't sales related or not respecting them. Certainly, and as long as I'm on that topic, sales culture. I say this a lot, and your audience may have heard me say this somewhere else. A miserable accountant can do great work. You don't have to love your job as an accountant. You don't have to have your heart engaged.
Yes.
Every month you can produce on-time, accurate statements. But show us, Ash, the sales guy, sales gal, who doesn't have their heart engaged, doesn't love what they do, doesn't have passion. They're not going to succeed. And yet in so many companies, and I've been in, and I'll tell you some stories of where management was anti-sales, and they would micromanage, and they would do everything to deflect the credit when the sales team did great. And yet when sales were poor, they would blame the salesperson.
Yes.
So it was very hard to keep the team energized and focused, regardless of how hard we trained them, because management didn't appreciate them. So I'll pause there, and that's a whole other conversation, really.
Absolutely. And I think, if you want to then kind of go back to that top, that sales professional, and you want to really make sure that they really embrace the fact that they really own their own destiny. And with that in mind, what would be, I know that in your book, you talk about the not so sweet, 15 reasons salespeople fit to get new business. And maybe we can just give them a few nuggets from those that will help them really understand that the buck stops with them.
They own it. Yeah. Well, why don't we start with that reason? In fact, I'll bring up that one first since you went there. Yeah. In chapter 2 of New Sales Simplified, I list these 16 reasons that salespeople don't get more new business, why they fail when it comes to bringing on net new business. And what's interesting from watching all these salespeople, a lot of them are really good people and really talented sellers, and they excel at different parts of selling: service, relationship management, in the insurance world, retention, project management, but they don't do so well when it comes to hunting and to bringing in new pieces of business. And the one you brought up, there are a lot of people in sales roles, Ash, that they don't take responsibility for their own results. I have a client, I can't name the client, but I did a workshop for them, sales kickoff in January, and I'm doing some ongoing work. And when I told them about the salesperson who's really good at pointing the finger, and they'll blame everybody. They'll blame their boss. They'll blame the factory. They'll blame the customer. They'll blame the competitor. They'll blame Obama. Now they'll blame Trump. They'll blame their mother. They never it's never their fault. It's the territory. It's someone else's fault. When I shared that story, the executive whispered in my ear, he said, and I won't say the name of the company, but he says, we call that the ABC company salute. Yeah. Everyone is really good at pointing the fingers, but they don't look in the mirror or point back at themselves. And I don't know how your perspective on this. I've never seen a really highly successful salesperson who sees themselves as a victim and just that their success is totally circumstantial. In fact, it's so funny. This is my friend Anthony Anarino's book. Yes. It's a phenomenal book. The foreword I wrote, it's average. The rest of the book is really great, except for the stupid title, because it's not the only sales guide. You need my books and Anthony's books,
of course. Yeah.
But you know what? The guy is brilliant. He may be the smartest guy in the sales business today. And much of the premise of the book is sales success is not situational. It's based on the seller. And we know it's not the product, it's not the company, it's not the market, it's the salesperson. So I never see someone produce at a high level unless they own the results. I'll give you another one. Not owning your calendar. That's probably one of the most prevalent reasons. Salespeople come to work and they forget their primary job, and they fill their day up doing all kinds of well-meaning things and playing good corporate citizen and going to meetings and helping out their friends. But they don't time block their calendar. They don't set aside dedicated blocks of time to prospect, to work on new business. And the truth is, nobody defaults to prospecting mode. No one, has 5 minutes and go, I'll call a few prospects. If you don't put the time in your calendar and guard that time, it's never going to happen. And in a lot of my big clients, I got thinking of one in particular right now.
Yes.
Up in New England, it's almost a game to see who can invite you to more meetings. And there's people in your company looking to see. They go in your calendar and looking to see if you have a slot open. And if you do, they want to drag you into some meeting they think you should attend. And by the way, I think letting people do that to your calendar is the dumbest thing that's ever happened. So the only way to combat that is you got to get in your calendar first and make appointments with yourself to work on your high value activities, making phone calls, connecting on LinkedIn, sending out emails, scheduling, research time where you're going to figure out who you need to pursue, and then actually executing and picking up the phone and making those calls. So there's a couple. Not taking responsibility, not owning your calendar. I'll give you another one that's probably as prominent as any. I see salespeople that can't tell their story. They can't articulate value. They don't have passion when they talk about their solution. When they do talk about, when they do their little pitch or they tell their story, it's very boring. It's very self-focused. They talk about their company and how long they've been in business, and they show organization charts. It's a mess. It's always kind of boring and self-focused and not compelling. And they do a terrible job articulating the real reasons that customers buy from them. Because the truth is, especially when you're prospecting, no one cares about your company and what you're trying to sell them. They only care about their issues. They've got outcomes they're trying to achieve. They've got pains. They've got problems. And we need a really strong, succinct, compelling, and customer issue-focused story that communicates. So I spend a lot of time with clients working on how do we fix our story. So there's just a handful of those 16 reasons.
Yeah, and I'd like to maybe take that a step further. When you just said that you work with clients on helping them develop what that value proposition is, sort of a customer-focused value proposition. How do you go about that with the client? And I want the listener to sort of understand that that's the rigor they're going to have to follow in order to get.
Great word, rigor, because it's not easy. It's not easy, Ash. Yeah. It's probably the ugliest exercise I do with the sales team. In fact, when I'm doing this in a workshop, in a room, whether it's a small group of a dozen or so, or it could be a room of a couple hundred people, we're going to do the exercise to start drafting their story. I put up a picture of sausage being made, and I make the point: you're not going to like me, and you're not going to enjoy this exercise because it's not fun to work through, because it's not natural to talk about your sales story. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. So I love the fact that you use the word rigor. It's going to take you some time in a meeting room, and then doing some homework after to go through a few iterations of your story. Because what tends to happen when I'm in a room full, and I have a large heavy equipment manufacturer who's a client.
Yes. And
they've been in business 100 years. It's a brand everybody's heard of. Their logo is very familiar. And the people that work there are very proud. Their product's made in America. Many of the people that are the dealerships that sell this heavy equipment have been in business forever, generation after generation. So when I ask them, hey, tell me your story. How do you, if you met someone and they said, tell me about your business or what do you do, what would you say? And they always say things like, our product's made in America. It always has been. We've been in business 100 years. We're the best at this. My family have been doing this for 4 generations. And I look at them and I say, that's wonderful. And I'm glad that makes you feel good. But the truth is that means nothing to your prospect. I mean, it's nice. And I would get to that at some point in my story. But why don't we lead with the issues that are on their mind, right? They have got problems they're trying to solve. They have opportunities they're trying to capture. They have employees they're trying to make more productive. They have product that needs to get transported. They have costs they're trying to reduce. They have profits they're trying to increase. They have customers they're trying to make happy. How does your solution address those things?
Exactly.
So I'll just go on one more second here. So generally, and I'll use my own business as an example.
Yes.
If someone said, Mike, what do you do? Tell me about your business. And that's a common question we all get asked. If I wasn't thinking or I was being lazy, I would say, Ash, thanks for asking. I'm a consultant. I'm a speaker. I do some sales training. I've got some great books. Let me tell you about my books.
Yes.
And the problem with that entire answer is it means nothing. It's totally self-focused.
Yeah.
And unless I happen to be talking to someone on the day they're looking for a sales consultant, which is like never.
Right.
Right. It falls on deaf ears. But what if I said, and I'm going to give you guys 2 lines that I think would be really helpful. And all of this is in chapter 8 of New Sales Simplified.
Yes.
If you start your story by either saying, we help blank, we help customer type or position type. So we help manufacturers, or we help CFOs who,
yes,
or I like to say, they turn to us when. So I'll use my business example. I work with senior executives. Senior executives look to me when their sales team's not firing on all cylinders, results aren't what they should be, the sales team's living in reactive mode, they're showing up late to opportunities, they're selling on price, they're getting commoditized, sales management's looking for some fresh ideas and outside perspective on building the type of winning, high-performance sales culture they want. Okay, I'll just stop there. I threw out 4 reasons that customers buy from me.
Yes.
What I know is that any CEO or senior executive I'm talking to has those issues. And that's why I bring those up first. And it immediately has them lower their guard. And now they want to talk to me because instead of seeing me as a consultant who's pitching, they see me as someone who solves those issues for someone else.
That are common to him as well.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're common to his situation as well, quite possibly.
Absolutely. And the natural reaction, if I list 4 or 5 issues that I address for my clients, just like when any salesperson structures their messaging that way, the very natural next question is they go, I've got a couple of those issues. Tell me a little bit more, or how do you guys work? And then you're in a dialogue.
Exactly.
But when you lead with your product and you brag about how different you are and how great your company is, everybody's defenses go up. Absolutely. And you sound like a salesperson who's pitching, not like a consultant or an expert who's there to help and wants to talk about it.
Exactly. And the conversation turns off and they walk away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, this was fantastic. And I think, I just want to let people know who are basically watching us live, definitely drop your questions in the Q&A window, and I'll definitely share these questions with Mike. I definitely believe, Mike, and I know you are the chief sales officer for your own business, as you just exactly said. And I think everybody who is a top performer is essentially running their own franchise. You have been giving a book of business, or they need to go out and make that book of business and create it. And then the next step they have to do is sort of go through this process of, I need to figure out what my message is, right? In a lot of examples, when you've done that for clients, how do you work with them on the rollout to make sure that everybody gets to really embody that languaging?
That's a great question. The best way is get them involved on the front end so they feel like they're contributing to shaping the story. It's not just the executive team and me. We're going to get input from everyone who sells and gather all these talking points together. And then as a team, we're going to do some wordsmithing and some editing, and we'll get it back to them. The rollout is really where the rubber meets the road, because we can do these exercises on sharpening the talking points. But what I really like to do is go to the next step, where we then give examples and show salespeople how to get that story or pieces of that story into their prospecting calls, and into their voicemail messages, and into their emails, and into their sales calls, and definitely into their presentations. So it's taking the hard work you do, where you're going through this really, the sausage making exercise, and then giving them some examples of how other companies use their story, and then and I literally will do this. I'll ask the salespeople, I'll give them some examples, we'll work through their story, and I'll ask them to get me back a couple voicemails, a couple telephone call outlines, a couple emails, a couple PowerPoint slides they might use, and then we'll talk through how to best deploy those. And then you get comfortable, because the problem with training, and anytime you try something new, you're not really comfortable and you're not good at it. But you know what happens if you try it a few times? All of a sudden, it gets a little more familiar and you start having success with it. You go, oh, this is pretty good. And then you do something 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, and eventually it's natural. And that's what I see happening with a lot of salespeople. But it's like you said, it takes work. It doesn't happen unless you want it to happen.
Exactly. And then I love what you said about how, having them co-create it with you so that they own it, and then they start re-implementing it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.